Okay. Isaiah chapter 53.
Let's hear the word of God. I'm reading from the New Living Translation. Who has believed our message? To whom has the Lord revealed his powerful arm? My servant grew up in the Lord's presence like a tender green shoot, like a root in dry ground. There was nothing beautiful or majestic about his appearance, nothing to attract us to him. He was despised and rejected, a man of sorrows, acquainted with deepest grief. We turned our backs on him and looked the other way. He was despised and we did not care. Yet it was our weaknesses he carried. It was our sorrows that weighed him down. And we thought his troubles were a punishment from God, a punishment for his own sins. But he was pierced for our rebellion, crushed for our sins. He was beaten with so we could be whole. He was whipped so we could be healed. All of us, like sheep, have strayed away. We have left God's paths to follow our own. Yet the Lord laid on him the sins of us all. He was oppressed and treated harshly, yet he never said a word. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep is silent before the shearers, he did not open his mouth. Unjustly condemned, he was led away. No one cared that he died without descendants, that his life was cut short in midstream. But he was struck down for the rebellion of my people. He had done no wrong and had never deceived anyone, but he was buried like a criminal. He was put in a rich man's grave. But it was the Lord's good plan to crush him and cause him grief. Yet, when his life is made an offering for sin, he will have many descendants. He will enjoy a long life, and the Lord's good plan will prosper in his hands. When he sees all that is accomplished by his anguish, he will be satisfied, and because of his experience, my righteous servant will make it possible for many to be counted righteous. He will bear all their sins. I will give him the honor of a victorious soldier because he exposed himself to death. He was counted among the rebels. He bore the sins of many and interceded for us all. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, Nora. Tonight, I just want us to reflect on this text as we usher into the holy hours of the Sabbath. The servant leadership, those who have done leadership, we have different types of leadership. But Isaiah 53 depicts the very core of a servant leadership. Beyond all questions, Jesus Christ modeled the law of sacrifice. He gave up for a time that riches of heaven in order to fulfill divinely ordained role on earth. You see, Jesus gave himself so you and I can have the life that is worth living. He went through grief, infirmities, insecurities, sin and transgression, sickness and disease, mental turmoil and pain, weaknesses, just for you, so that you would gain security and solid emotion. You would gain forgiveness from guilt. You will gain health and wholeness. You will gain peace of mind, and his strength will continue to be with you. You see, this chapter is predicted centuries of years before this incident actually happened. What evidence do you need to prove that the scripture is a word from God? It's a trust word from God himself. And what is predicted years, hundreds of years, would come true just as it's been predicted. The Lord has us on his heart. He has a plan from the foundation of the earth to save you and I. And that plan will be completed. And he will not rest until we are all given the ability and the chance to be saved. The Holy Spirit still works on our hearts. May the Lord bless us and keep us, that we would continue to follow his dictates and his directions for us all. Amen. As I said before, our brother Jeremey will be leading us tonight. Dr. Rowe, he works with the East Sussex Hospital mental health team as a clinical psychologist. And he will be leading us tonight on addiction. This is a continuation of what our brother Emmanuel has been taking us through. Brother Emmanuel couldn't be with us tonight because the time that we set for him was not enough to cover those that he wants to cover. And so after tonight, sometime in March, April, we will invite him back to present a few sessions on anxiety and also other mental health conditions that we were not able to cover. And so tonight, we are also privileged and blessed to have our brother Jeremey amongst us. And whenever you have a question or challenges, anything to do with mental health, he will be really happy to help. So please, I would give him the platform after prayers, and Jeremey, the platform will be yours shortly after prayer. Let's have a word of prayer. Dear Father, we just want to thank you. We praise you and we glorify you. You are a mighty God. All things were made through you. None of us would be here had it not been you. Some of us have been ill-stricken. Some of us have been weak. Some of us have struggled at work. Some of us have had frustrations and weaknesses and troublesome. Some of us have had challenges that even challenges our spirituality. But we are gathered here tonight because of your grace and mercies. Sometimes we go through certain things that we may not realize has significant impact on our lives. Tonight we are here to learn how our bodies react and how we respond with addiction. Teach us to love you and bless us all in Jesus' name. Amen. The floor is yours, Brother Jeremey.
Thank you, Pastor. Happy Sabbath, everyone. It's a privilege to be here doing this talk with you. So hopefully it will be of interest and of use to you. I realise it's probably not the most cheery of subjects on a Friday evening. Addiction isn't a very happy topic to talk about, but hopefully it will be helpful to you. And I'd like to make this as relevant as I can, because you might be kind of thinking, well, I don't have an addiction. I've never been addicted to anything. So, why kind of be here? Why listen to this? I think there's a few things I'd say about that if that is on your mind. If you're thinking, well, this isn't relevant to me. Addiction is something that can affect anyone. It doesn't matter what your standing is in life. It doesn't matter how faithful you are. It doesn't matter how strong your belief is. It doesn't matter what your history is. Addiction is incredibly powerful, and it can take hold at any point. So you might at some point in the future, if not now, become addicted to something, and hopefully what we cover will be of use. And as Pastor said, I'm around. There's other professionals around that can help. But also, I think you may have family or friends that are addicted, um, have been addicted, but might be struggling with addiction currently. So I think if you think of not only of yourself, but also of others, family and friends that might be struggling with this, but also as a church community, hopefully we're going to have all sorts of people walking through our doors, not just Christians, but people that have addictions themselves and are in the throes of a very um, strong addiction and are looking for help. And I think one of the things that we can do to help people is just be there to listen to them and understand what they're going through. And hopefully, what I present today will help you to understand what people might be going through who are struggling with an addiction or have an addiction, but are kind of on the edge and thinking, oh, I kind of need a bit of support. Maybe, if I go to church, I get that support. So addiction knows no boundaries. So I think just remember that this might be relevant to you, to others, to people that we come into contact with, or even people that don't even walk through the doors of church, people that you might just meet in the street. So keep that in mind as we go through the presentation. Um, Also, I think what's really important is that we take a very sort of as much as we can, of course we're human, but a non-judgmental stance around addiction. Um, it as I said, we're many of us are just as we can easily be on the edge of an addiction. Some of us might be in an addiction. So I think we just have to be compassionate. We have to be um, very considerate about why people might be addicted to substances and to certain behaviours. And remember that what people need is compassion, understanding, and support. And if we criticize people and judge them, which I think, to be fair, sometimes we're good at as Christians. We're quite good at criticizing and judging people that don't live up to the standards that we aspire to live up to. I think it's important with these kind of things to step back and think, actually, let's think about why this person's experiencing this, what's gone in their lives, what's their history, and why might they be struggling, and seek to support them. And then we can be a place where people aren't afraid to say that they're struggling, because if we're too critical, people don't want to speak to us and won't want to approach us and say, I'm struggling with this addiction. Can you help me? Because they fear, kind of being criticized or being judged. Um, and I have no doubt that that's what Jesus would have recommended. Um, that's what he did recommend, and that's what he would say now. So I think if we keep those points in mind, hopefully this can be a useful presentation. I will be as quick as I can. Last time I presented this, with David and Pastor, I took too long. I think I spoke too much. So I will be as brief as I can without kind of compromising the content. Um, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Um, I'm more than happy for questions and comments. And if you disagree, I'm more than happy for us to have a discussion about that and hopefully find some common ground. My opinion is my opinion. It's not necessarily the only opinion. It's not the only way to kind of deal with addictions and understanding of addictions. People have different approaches. This is mine, based on my kind of years of experience of working in addiction services and with people that have addictions and associated mental health problems. But if you have a different idea, either based on your experience of yourself or family member or friend, then please share it, and we can all learn, and I can learn too. Okay, so I'll just get the slides up, so bear with me while I share the screen. Okay. Okay. You will see a picture there of a cigarette. When we talk about addictions, I think what we often think of are substances. We think of tobacco, we think of alcohol, we think of cocaine, of heroin. They're the kind of classic things that people become addicted to, and that I think most people, when they think of addiction, comes into their minds and think, oh, that's what addiction's about. But addiction is broader than that, and we will cover that. Addiction does cover more things. It covers substances and behaviors, which we will look at. So when we're going through this, and you think, well, I don't do anything like that, I don't drink, but just think actually you might be addicted to something else. And I think part of this is just looking inwards and thinking, well, is there anything that I might become addicted to? Anything in my life that I might like a little bit too much? I kind of engage in it a little bit too much, maybe social media, for example, or looking at our phones is one that was never around when I was young, but is now a big thing, and people do become addicted to that. So there are very subtle things that we can become addicted to. I just start off with this lovely quote from Corinthians: "No temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind. But when you are tempted, He would also provide a way out so that you can endure it." The Bible, as far as I know, and Pastor, maybe towards the end you can correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't directly talk about addiction. It talks about kind of excess, drinking too much and being drunk, etc. But it doesn't necessarily address addiction, and perhaps because addiction wasn't really conceptualized as it is now in today's kind of age, that we have very specific treatments and understanding of addiction, and we have substances and things that are very highly addictive that probably wasn't around in those times. But I think this is a lovely quote, because it says no temptation has overtaken you that except that is common to mankind. So, and the other one is there's nothing new under the sun. The process of addiction has been around since the beginning of time. How we become addicted and how the brain engages with behaviors or substances is the same. So whenever we talk about addiction, this is something that would have been around from very early on. But what God does is provide us a way of dealing with our addiction. And what we have today in order as a way to deal with addiction is psychotherapy, our addiction services, it's research, presentations like this and other support services. So regardless of where you're at or where your friends or family are at with addiction, there is a way out, there is support out there, and I believe God has provided that. Okay, so addiction to what? So when we're thinking about addiction, well, what are we talking about? When I'm presenting, when I'm doing this, I'm probably thinking more about substances. That's because that's my history. I've worked in substance abuse services for some time, and people that go through the doors of substance services are addicted to something, crack cocaine, heroin, that kind of thing. But it is broader than that, as I said at the beginning. You can be addicted to pretty much anything. Anything goes. You can be addicted to substances, and that goes from heroin, medications, opioids, based medication, alcohol, caffeine, nicotine. But you can also be addicted to certain behaviors. Work, for example, we can be addicted to work. We can be addicted to social media, sex addiction. There's all kind of addictions out there. Basically, any kind of behavior or substance that you get too involved with, and we look at the definition in a second, you can be addicted to. Okay. This is a great quote too. A common misconception is that addiction is a choice or moral problem, and that all you need to do is stop. But nothing could be further from the truth. And hopefully, I'm going to kind of make that clear that just stopping is usually not possible for people. It's usually not an option because it isn't possible. If it was, there wouldn't be addiction services. We wouldn't have all the research that's been conducted on addiction. We wouldn't have nicotine replacement. We wouldn't have the wealth of services that exist to support people with addictions, substitute medication. It isn't a choice. People do not choose to become addicted. People choose to use substances. There's no question about that. People choose to work excessively. People choose to look at social media. Or sorry, people choose to work, but I don't think people choose necessarily to work excessively. People choose to look at social media. People choose to smoke and drink alcohol, but people don't choose to become addicted. I don't think usually people don't set out when they start smoking to become addicted to it. They may have in the back of their mind, I might get addicted to it, but they don't choose that. And so saying to somebody that's addicted to something, whether it be behavior or substance, you just need to stop, just put up your socks, just get on with it and stop, is probably one of the most unhelpful things you could ever say to somebody. It would just get their back up, and you won't be very popular, and they won't come back to you for support. So if you have said that to somebody, you can find a different way. You can kind of correct that and speak to them again. But just stopping usually it's just isn't that easy at all. And anybody that has been addicted to something will know that with all the will in the world they want to stop, but they can't. And that's why we have rehab. Um, People go to rehab and they go around rehab quite a few times, and they fall out with their family. I mean, they get in trouble with the police, because they can't stop. But there is a way to stop, but just stopping isn't it. There is a process to it. Okay, so what is addiction? Um, it's essentially not having control over doing, taking, using something to the point where it can be harmful. And the key thing there is not having control over it. If you had control over smoking cigarettes, you would stop. Um, if you could control it, you would just stop completely. And there's so many people that when they smoke would say, "Oh, I can just give up tomorrow if I wanted to," but that's an addiction talking, because they usually can't. Um, and so yeah, not being able to stop. And so when you haven't got the substance or you're not doing the behavior, there's an intense need or craving um, for it, which you are unable to resist. So typically you smoke, you put the cigarette out, and then I don't know how long it would take, say an hour or so, you'd want another cigarette. So you have an intense need or craving for it, and because it's left your system, it's withdrawing from your system. And it's the same with the behavior. Once you've done the thing that you're addicted to, you'll have a period of rest because your anxiety is relieved, you feel okay, and then you get an intense need or craving for it again, which is a really difficult thing to describe, to articulate. Somebody just has this burning need or desire to have it, to do the thing. We've all seen if you haven't experienced somebody with a sort of heroin addiction, for example, we've all seen TV programs or films and stuff where people are addicted and they do anything to get it. I mean, it's such an intense craving and need. So addiction is something that essentially you feel powerless to deal with, and that's why you just can't stop, because your whole body needs it and your mind needs it, whatever it might be that you're craving and you're addicted to. There are various phases of addiction. And here I just talk about a substance because it's quite easy to explain. So you may use, say you're smoking cigarettes, there'd be an initiation usually. People don't usually just pick the thing up that they become addicted to and start using it. People don't usually just decide themselves to start drinking alcohol. It's usually social drinking. Maybe they saw the family drinking, their parents. They might be with friends that are drinking and they get offered. So they think, oh, I'll try that. I'd quite like the look of that. Or they might feel pressured to. There's various reasons. But usually people are introduced to it by others. And then they'll experiment, just maybe try out drinking now and again or smoking a few cigarettes. But because of its addictive nature, because the thing is addictive, nicotine is highly, highly addictive. Um, People very rarely are able to smoke a couple of cigarettes, and well, people can smoke a few cigarettes and leave it completely. But if somebody starts kind of experimenting and then it goes to regular use, that it's very likely they'll become addicted to it. Um, so regular use, lots of people can stay there, regular use. The There are certain things that in and of themselves they're not bad. They're working, for example, is great. We need to work to earn money, a sense of purpose, belonging, and giving back to society, etc. Work is important for our self-esteem and confidence. Um, so that in and of itself isn't bad, but it's the overworking and the feel that the belief that you have to work to feel better, which is the problem. And arguably alcohol in and of itself, it's not a problem. It's neither good or bad. It's not evil. But at the same time, it's not great. It's just pretty much neutral in and of itself. Um, but it's how you use it and what you do with it that is the problem. Now, regular use for some remains, and people. There are many people out there that are not addicted to alcohol, that are not addicted to other things, but it can and often leads to abuse. Too much of it, essentially. Too much of it in inappropriate times. It takes over your life. You then get that process that I mentioned here, that intense need and craving for it, and it kind of consumes you. So abuse is using it too much to the detriment of your ability to function. Um, Abuse then often leads to tolerance. So tolerance, as you probably know, is where your body plateaus. You need more to get the same hit, to get the same benefit, um, which then leads to a psychological dependence. So you have this kind of belief that you need it. You depend on it for your well-being. You depend on it for your happiness, which then leads to the more kind of physical addiction. In an ideal world, people who are addicted will then get treatment. Doesn't always happen. Um, But in an ideal world, people will go from addiction to treatment, and I'll look at some of the kind of treatment strategies a bit later. And then from treatment, again, in an ideal world, people go to recovery and be recovered from the addiction. Um, doesn't always happen because addiction is so consuming and so powerful, and people often go through this kind of process quite a few times. Until they get to that kind of recovery. But there is hope, certainly, that if you abuse and then that leads to addiction, there are treatment programs out there, that there's therapies out there that can be help you to deal with the addiction and then can lead to recovery. And recovery means different things for different people. Recovery for some means complete abstinence, never using that again. Recovery for others means occasional use. For others, it means harm reduction, but we'll come to that a bit later. And recovery doesn't necessarily mean that the completely getting rid of the desire to have that again, or the craving. It means that you recover from that severe addiction, and it means that you can function without or with less. And maybe what I should have said at the beginning as well is that from my perspective in my work, I really can't have an agenda. I can't say to somebody when I start working with them, you must stop the addiction, you have to stop using. And I think that would be, I mean, I think that's fair advice for all of us, really, if we have a friend or family member or somebody that we just know, um, casually, that if we put our agenda and say, this is what you must do, it's very likely to backfire. And we all know if we're told to do something, we just usually end up wanting to go and do it. It's just human nature, isn't it? We like to rebel, and we like to do things that we're not allowed to do. And if we come down hard on somebody and say, you can't do this, this is what I think, again, you're likely to get their backs up. So the one of the best things you can do really is just say, what do you want from this? Where do you want to be with this addiction? Do you want to stop drinking, or do you want to reduce? What's your goal? And then work with the person. It is important that they feel that you're there to support them and listen to them. You're not there to tell them what to do. um, my experience over the years is that just doesn't work. Okay, so why do people become addicted? There are various reasons. One is that many of the things that people become addicted to are actually very pleasurable. People enjoy drinking. People like the feeling that they get from alcohol. Um, People like opium, opioids, heroin, diazepam, opioid-based medication. It makes them feel relaxed. It makes them feel calm. Um, People enjoy exercise. You can become addicted to exercise. People enjoy exercise. I exercise. I love exercise. I might be slightly addicted to it, but I enjoy it. It releases endorphins, dopamine. It makes you feel good. So I think it is important to recognize that people become addicted because what they're addicted to gives them something that they really like, and we are all prone to that. We're If you're not addicted to something, you never have been, you're not a special type of person that is above enjoying those substances. And the people that are addicted to heroin, for example, they're not a certain type of person that means that they like those substances. Those substances are um, enjoyable. People like them. They give people pleasure. They make them feel good. So remember that if you have a family member or a friend that is addicted, just remember the thing that they're addicted to serves a very, very important function in their lives. And one of those functions is that they at some point, probably not now that they're addicted, but at some point, certainly early on, they enjoyed it. And that's when, if you have too much of a good thing, sometimes isn't good because you enjoy it too much, and then you want too much of it, and then it becomes a problem. So this is a really kind of useful understanding or kind of model really for behavior, any sort of behavior that we engage in, is that we essentially do things to get something and to avoid something. So the reward is to get something. So we all engage in reward motivated behavior. So we do things to feel nice, to feel calm. We buy things because we need them, but also because we like buying things. It makes us feel good. You know, we like certain items of clothing, for example, so we might buy them. So we do we behave in a certain way to get something nice, and that's called positive reinforcement. So we get pleasure from those things. And with addictions, people will engage in that addiction because they get something pleasurable from it. They also, and this is a very important one too, is that they avoid something. So if, if you're addicted to something, you will use that substance or do that thing to avoid either a negative or unwanted outcome, emotion or thought, and that's called negative reinforcement. So it's something negative that reinforces. Um, so if you think about cigarettes, people will get a relief of anxiety. People will get a sense of like, oh, calm. I mean, actually, physiologically, it does the complete opposite, but psychologically, you feel calmer. Um, and also, they will smoke a cigarette to avoid that uncomfortable, that horrible feeling, that craving, that need, that anxiety that they get from not smoking a cigarette when they want it. And if you apply this to pretty much every behavior really, but particularly around addictions, that people become addicted to something because they get something from it and they're avoiding something. We all do things because we want to get something nice and we want to avoid something that we don't particularly want. Okay, so how does addiction work? Sorry for it's a bit of a blurry image. I apologize for that. Um, it will start from a trigger. So something will pop up into our mind, or physiologically we feel something. So let's talk about gambling. You walk past Ladbrokes bookies and it triggers you. It reminds you of maybe a time that you won some money on the horses. You think about what it might be like being in there. You think about the excitement. It reminds you of something that pretty much you enjoyed, really, that you liked. Um, you then have a craving, you have an urge, you have a desire to go inside and place a bet. The ritual would be placing the bet, looking at the form, you know, the odds, how much money should I put on? That's the ritual. And then you do it and see that feels good. You get a relief of the craving, you get a relief of the urge, you no longer feel anxious. Very soon after, I'd say, the length of time is completely different for everybody, of course, but at some point after you've done that thing, whether it be a behavior or you've used that substance, you start to feel a bit guilty, particularly if you're at a place where you want to stop, and it's affecting your life. You start feeling bad about it. You'd feeling ashamed. You think about the money that you've lost. You think about the people that you've hurt. Generally, you just feel rubbish about it. That in and of itself can become a trigger. So you feel rubbish about what you've just done, and that makes you think, oh, I need to get rid of this feeling. I need to do something to feel better. And you've got another trigger. So you can see how that cycle kind of goes round. And at some point, you've got to intervene in that cycle. There are various ways to intervene, which we'll look briefly at later. Kind of trigger, you can intervene with the guilt, you can intervene with the using, but this is the kind of general cycle that people will go through. So you can see how powerful this is, because that trigger is unwanted. You know, people don't walk around looking for triggers. People don't walk around looking for their memories or their desire to use to be elicited. It happens very innocently. It might be a phone call that you got from somebody that you don't want to speak to and it didn't go well. It might be in a text that you got that upset you, and that could be a trigger, can make you feel really bad about things. And then you start thinking, oh, I need to get rid of this. I need to get rid of how I feel. I want to feel better. And there you've got the cycle that goes round. So you can see how people are, to some extent, or to a very large extent, a bit of a slave to this. You know, they're kind of caught in this cycle, and they're not choosing this. They're not choosing to feel guilty. when they're triggered and they think about using and they use, they're not thinking ahead. They're not thinking, oh, I'm going to feel guilty about this afterwards. I need to stop. I can't do this, so I'm going to feel guilty. That the brain just gets fired, and it happens so quickly, that it goes into this cycle. And before you know it, people are using, and then they feel rubbish, and then they think, why did I do this? And then it kind of starts again. So we do really need to be compassionate of people that are caught up in this cycle, because it's not something that they're choosing to be caught up in, and it can be very hard to get out of it. So neurobiological. So pleasure produces a surge of dopamine in the brain, which is rewarding, and addiction is basically a shortcut to this process. So when you do something naturally that feels good, and say we go, you might go for a walk and you see some lovely flowers, and that makes you feel nice inside, doesn't it? It makes you feel warm. These lovely flowers are beautiful. So you've got a surge of dopamine. You feel really nice about that, and you enjoy looking at flowers. It's something that's really pleasurable. Um, that's natural. You might see somebody that you really like, you get a piece of dopamine, you're enjoying their company. So we all have this dopamine. We all have the need to feel nice, to have pleasure, to feel nice emotions, and to feel good. Um, Drugs and addictive behavior, they just cut to the chase. I mean, they just get there within a matter of seconds. Cocaine, for example, crack cocaine particularly, is just straight in there, and you get that rush of dopamine, and you feel fantastic. Now, for most people, if they get that, they're going to want that again, and that's why it's so addictive. Natural things, walking around a garden, seeing lovely flowers, they're not addictive because you don't get that instant fast, intense hit of dopamine. When you get that surge of dopamine in your brain, that is like, wow, that is fantastic. And that creates that dependence, that creates that need, it creates that desire to have it again. In actually in a very easy way. People can be at home and they can use drugs and feel great. It's an easy process. So again, it's convenient. It uses the brain's chemistry in a very clever way. So we learn that activity is pleasurable. So we're more likely to do it again. And of course, tolerance builds up over time. Physiological tolerance builds, and we just need more of it. And the more we need, the stronger the addiction gets. Okay, so what does this mean for us? Well, essentially means for the people that are addicted, and for us who might at some point become addicted, is that we're not weak. There isn't something wrong with the person that becomes addicted to a behavior or a substance, that they're not lacking in something. They don't lack self-control or willpower. They are essentially being affected by a substance or by a behavior that is incredibly addictive, and I don't know who would be able to resist that. If their circumstances, if their life circumstances were um, facilitated, let's say they've had a very difficult year. They're with some friends that are using drugs, for example, and they're feeling very rubbish. They're feeling fed up. They don't see any hope. Friends offer them something and say, look, this is going to make you feel better. They see their friends enjoying themselves, and they're likely to use. It's human behavior, and it's not because they're weak. It's because this stuff is incredibly intense and powerful. Um, and the agents of addictions are experts at it. So we obviously don't get tobacco cigarette adverts on in magazines or TV anymore. But when I mean years ago, they were advertised by doctors. They had doctors on magazine covers advertising cigarettes. So the tobacco industry, as we know, is a multi-million billion-pound industry that knows what it's doing. It puts money into this stuff because it knows that it's incredibly addictive. Um, Allegedly, I realise this has been recorded, and hopefully there's no tobacco representatives listening that might sue us. But alcohol as well. You just need to see the kind of adverts for alcohol and how it's people enjoying themselves. Young, beautiful people enjoying themselves and all in control and looking fantastic. In beautiful looking bars and soft lighting and everything. So the people that sell this stuff that people become addicted to know what they're doing. And drug dealers, drug manufacturers, pharmaceutical, but also street drugs. they take huge amount of the illegal people take a huge amount of risks because they know that it sells, because it's incredibly strong. So people can become victims to I think what is a very clever industry, and I think you have to be very um, I think you have to be very shielded, I think, to not have been exposed to any of that kind of advertising or any of that image that that attracts people. Okay, so we do need to have compassion, and we do need to forgive ourselves if we've had an addiction or have an addiction, might have an addiction in the future. If we have friends or family, or we know people that are in the throes of an addiction, we need to remember that they're not in a vacuum, that they're being influenced very strongly by a very powerful and wealthy industry. But that isn't an excuse. I'm not in any way saying that it's okay for people to be addicted, or it's okay for people to use heroin, or it's okay for people to excessively behave in certain ways. This is just a way of understanding why and how people remain addicted, rather than saying it's okay because the industry is a massive one, and it's about understanding why rather than using it as an excuse, if that makes sense. Okay, so what now? So that was a kind of very brief kind of overview of what addiction is and how people become addicted. But what now? Let's say yourself or somebody you know wants to change. You have a choice. You can change and do something about it, or you can continue with the addiction, which many people do, but many people also choose the option to change. Um, these are just some questions to ask yourself, or that you could ask people, or suggest that people ask themselves. When and why did you start? That's going to be key to know whether somebody started an addictive behaviour because of an event in their life. Um, there are many people that become addicted that have had quite horrendous lives, very difficult childhoods, have been traumatized, very difficult um, conditions that they grew up in, and some of the stories I hear of people that I work with, I think, well, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised you need something to take away that pain. Um, of course, that isn't the most effective. Well, it is effective. It's effective in the short term. People that have had very difficult and traumatic lives, and who have experienced more recent trauma, um, addictive behaviours are very effective at taking away some of those uncomfortable, horrible feelings and making them feel good. Of course, in the long run, it's not, because you become addicted, and that is a problem in and of itself. But knowing why, whether somebody just started socially because they thought it was cool to smoke or to drink, and because their friends were doing it, and because it helps them socially, might feel better, might be more confident, and that's going to be a key kind of way of helping somebody deal with their addiction, when they get to the point of wanting to change. Um, what was the course of your use? People kind of, do they wax and wane with their use, or with the behaviour? Is it a kind of quite a constant kind of course, or are there certain times of the year, maybe, or certain periods of their life in which they might become more addicted? So stress, for example. Somebody might lose their job, and then take up an addiction, or use something that they become addicted to. Um, and then what I said earlier, which is what does the addiction give you? That's such an important question to ask somebody. What do you get from this? What does it help you with? And what does it help you avoid? And what would happen if you continued or stopped? So let's say you continued in your use, in where would you be in 5 years' time, for example, 2 years' time, and where would you be if you stopped? And also just help people to think about, well, how does the addiction affect their life? What does it prevent them from doing? Um, it, does it cut them off from friends? Does it give them friends? In what way does it impact on their life? Okay, so one of the kind of big things here is moderation or abstinence, and as I said earlier on, I don't have an agenda when I work with people, and I'd recommend as well that if you're supporting somebody that has an addiction, that you keep your agenda back. You don't make it obvious, unless of course they ask you for it, or it's really clear, um, because somebody might actually want to moderate their use rather than completely stop, and if you insist that they stop, you're going to lose them. They're not going to ask you for support. There are some people that can use alcohol and drugs and not become addicted. People drink alcohol and they're not addicted. Um, Nicotine, I would disagree. I think people do become addicted to nicotine. I don't think there's any question about that, really. There's certain behaviors, certain things that people can use and not become addicted to, and that's okay. If you have been addicted before to something, the general advice is that you go for abstinence. That I think somebody that has been addicted to gambling, for example, usually can't just gamble every so often. But I think that the advice really is just to stop completely and just don't go back. So who becomes addicted and why? Well, it really does become depends on the function of addiction. So if somebody is more of a social drinker, for example, it might be a bit easier for them to stop. But if somebody is drinking because they have a very traumatic history and events in their life, that might be a bit harder. They might need a bit more support or different support. But yeah, there's no one way. There's no one way that works for everyone. Some people they prefer to moderate their use, and some people they just need to stop completely. And of course, I take the kind of church's line on addictions out of this bit here, because this is about working with people that are addicted and about where they want to be in the short term. It might be different to what our expectations or wish for them in the long term. Okay, so this is called the cycle of change. People will go through this cycle. Difficult to say, but on average, probably about 8 times is the kind of average number of times it takes somebody to sort of stop an addiction, to recover from addiction. Of course, that's a very general kind of figure. People can go through this once and stop. People go through it 15 times. People go through all their lives and don't completely stop. But the first stage is a pre-contemplation, where somebody who's addicted has no intention on changing their behaviors, and they don't even think it's a problem. They're just, I'm happy doing this, and I don't see it as a problem at all. The next stage or phase would be a contemplation, that they're aware that there's a problem, but they don't really have any commitment to do anything about it. So you might be noticing that you're missing work quite a bit more, you're going in late a lot more than you used to because you're waking up with a hangover, and your motivation's gone. You're aware that there's a problem, but it's not really causing that big a deal in your life, and you can still function. But typically it gets to a point where actually you think, okay, I kind of need to do something about this. People can stay in pre-contemplation, and that's where they're addicted for many years and really struggle to kind of do anything about it. And many people just stay in contemplation. They're aware of the problem, don't know how to do anything about it. And this isn't all about the individual. It could be that somebody's housing, they're homeless, they don't have any social or family support, and of course that's where we would come in, not to completely fill that gap, but to support people that might be at that stage where they don't have anyone to turn to. They don't have any kind of support network or community that they can go to get support, which is why, which I've said, it's really important to have that non-judgmental stance and to welcome people regardless of where they're at with this. So the next stage will be preparation. So the intent on taking action to address problems, and that might mean going to a counsellor, going to a support service and asking for help, talking to friends or family, going to church and saying, look, I've got a problem, I need some help with this. The next stage there is action, and so they start reducing their use, they start having therapy, they start kind of avoiding certain places that they used to go to, where they used to use or do the thing that they're addicted to. And then you go into a fantastic stage of maintenance, which is where you start doing new things, new behaviors. So you no longer do the thing that you're addicted to, and you start doing new things.
Can I say something?
Yes, you can, please.
Sure. One of the things I think is quite relevant is that the person who's trying to offer the help has experience of addiction themselves. I think that if you're listening to someone that's never had an addiction and they're trying to tell you how to give it up, they really don't understand. Like you say, it is an absolute force, a desperate need. You just cannot do without it. Having at one time, I was on 100 tailor-mades a day at one point, and I was coughing my heart up and broke all the time, and I thought this has got to stop.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and that's a good point. And the first, I think one of the first quote or the second quote that I put down, which is that this isn't just about you telling people just to stop, because I'm sure if somebody told you, look, just stop, just throw them away, you would have said you probably would have said a few expletives at that point to them, because it wouldn't have been as easy as that.
Yeah, I tried several methods to try and stop, and most of them didn't work.
Yeah. It is a force to be reckoned with, isn't it? Addiction, and it is. I think it does certainly help to have been in that place to be able to support somebody. But if you haven't, it doesn't mean that you can't help, because if you haven't, the best thing you can do is listen to somebody tell you what it's like. You know, if you have no idea, if let's say your daughter comes up to you and says, look, I'm addicted to this, I want to stop, and you haven't been addicted to anything yourself, the best thing you can do is say, tell me about it. What is it like for you? Help me to understand what this is like for you. You know, help me understand when this is when it's hard, when you feel like using. If you don't know, just be inquisitive and ask, and you don't need to pretend to know. You know, with any of these mental health problems that we've been covering and that Emmanuel covered earlier, and sort of depression and suicide, you don't have to know. If you don't know, you can just say, look, help me to understand. I want to help you. I want to know what this is like. And if the person's kind of receptive, they'll tell you, and that's how you can help. So relapse, unfortunately, and the reality is that most people, when they go through this stage or spiral of change, stages of change, is that they will relapse. Most people who have an addiction, who give up, will relapse at some point. And that is a very sad kind of reality. And I would love to be able to say that it's, it isn't the case, and that when you get to maintenance, that life is rosy and everything's fantastic, and you put it behind you and you never go back. People typically relapse, but that's okay, because you can get back on, and you can usually go back to sort of preparation stage and start doing what you did before. And nobody ever goes back to square one. Nobody ever goes back to where they began, because they would have got knowledge of their triggers. They would have got knowledge of the things that made it difficult for them to stop, the barriers. They would have got knowledge about the things to avoid, things to do. And when somebody does relapse, it's so important not to criticize them and not to blame them, and to be accepting that they're in the place that they're at, because it's hard. It's hard to give up. And again, with all of this, the best thing we can do if somebody relapses is just say, okay, how can I help you get back onto this and give up again? Okay. We are almost at the end of this, just to let you know. I think there's a couple more slides. So how do you manage the addiction, or how do you help somebody manage their addiction? Well, it really does depend on where they're at in the cycle, and that's this cycle. Depends on where they're at in this cycle. If they're at pre-contemplation, if they've got no intention of changing their behavior at all, you could maybe say to them, this is causing us a problem. What you're doing is a problem to me. You're coming home and you're drunk, for example, and you're causing arguments, or you're out all the time working and I never see you, and introduce the idea to them that this is a kind of a problem for you, and that this needs addressing. If somebody is in preparation stage, it might be that you help them research where they can get help. It might be that you find them a list of services, you find websites. There's incredibly helpful websites out there, and you can send it to them. If somebody's in maintenance stage, for example, you can go out with them to somewhere that they wouldn't normally go, that is completely not associated with their addiction, and support them, accompany them, just provide them sort of general support. So it really does depend on where they're at. Now, what's the goal of the person? Is it maintenance, or is it reduction? What are you addicted to? So if somebody is addicted to tobacco, to nicotine, then you can use replacements. There are some great medications out there now that can help people reduce almost eliminate completely the craving for tobacco. There are drugs there are medications that can help people with alcohol problem, that when they drink they feel sick, which is a reason not to drink. um, it's important to think about what support you have. So if you're thinking, or somebody's thinking about stopping or reducing, it's about encouraging them. Well, who in your life can you ask for support? Um, what services are there that you can get support from? What helplines are there that you can get support from? Um, and also to think about, is this a need to reduce or just go completely cold turkey? They're very personal questions, and those answers are going to be different for each person. Some people choose to do harm reduction. So, for example, rather than drinking 5% beer, they might drink 3%, 3.5% beer, and that can help them to reduce, but in a safer way, so they're not completely going cold turkey, which for many people is just too much of a shock. The other harm reduction, as I said, tobacco, you can get tobacco replacement. You can get patches. Um, People who are gambling, for example, if they're gambling 5 days a week, they might reduce to 4 days a week, or they might limit the amount of money that they spend. So things like that. You play around with how you kind of reduce, and you can get support with that. Definition of abstinence is just not taking it, basically. It's a bit of a fancy way to say that. Just say no. And how to start? Well, understand the cycle of change, where you're at in it. Understand what the function of addiction is in your life, or the person that you know that is addicted, what the function of the addiction is in their life. Think about the pros and cons of use, and here's a slide here for that. And it's quite a simple one in which you just go, what are the pros of smoking, and what are the cons of smoking? What are the disadvantages of smoking? And you can do, you can do that with much any behavior really, or any sort of choice that you've got to make. It doesn't have to be an addictive behavior. Visualize how life would be different. So if I didn't drink, what would I be doing instead? All the time that I've got, and what could I be drinking instead of alcohol, for example? Really, really, really important. And one of the best indicators of stopping any addiction is that you get support on board. And so you tell others about your intention and ask for support, but be careful who you ask. Don't ask the person that's just going to tell you to stop, for example. Be clear about your goal. If your goal is to reduce, be clear about that, rather than just aiming for abstinence, and set a plan. Because if you're a bit unclear about where you want to be, it's a bit haphazard, and you don't really quite know where you're going with it. So it's really important to be very clear. I want to drink 4 times a week rather than 7 times, that kind of thing. And identify triggers. What makes you think about using? What makes you think about, is it, do you get 50 emails that makes you think, oh, I've just got to work really late tonight? So what triggers you? What makes you kind of do the behavior that you're compelled to do, that you feel you have to do? And then plan how to manage them. For example, somebody that might be addicted to gambling, they'd walk past, go an alternative way than walk past a betting shop. They might put a bar on betting services online, so they just can't gamble online, for example. Summary. Okay, so we're at the end. Know your addiction history and how it's maintained. Your addiction history is, how did it start? When did it start? Who was in your life at the time? What was going on in your life at the time for you to start? That is really important, and you can do that yourself, and you can think about somebody that you know, if you're helping them. Why do you use, or what is the function of the substance or behavior? And are there any alternatives? Can you get that pleasurable feeling from something else? Can you feel good about yourself by doing something less harmful? Can you manage that uncomfortable feeling that you have by doing something else? Do you have to do the addictive behavior to get rid of it? Know your triggers, your vulnerable moments, times of day, for example. You might be more prone to doing the addictive behavior at night, or lunchtime, or when you're bored. And again, think of alternatives. And I think without doubt, you get professional and informal support. Tell people of your intentions, elicit friends and families to get them on board to help you, and go to those services. There's no shame in asking for help. It's important to ask for help, because we're not an island. can't do this by ourselves often, and if you keep this in and struggle on your own, the likelihood is that you're not going to, or your friend or family member isn't going to overcome it. But getting kind of the right support is key. Okay, I think that is, yep, that's my last slide. I'll just come out of the screen sharing. So that was a sorry, bear with me. To concentrate as I pause share. Okay, stop share. There it is. I missed the button right at the top of the screen. As you found out with the other presentations by Manuel, that these subjects are, there's a lot to these subjects. There's so much we could talk about, and you could spend weeks talking about these things. So this was a kind of a quick tour of addiction and how to manage it. Does anybody have any kind of questions about what I've covered, or any comments, or anything that you disagree with, or anything that you want to kind of add?
Yes, Pastor Garth. You have to unmute, Pastor. Still muted. Yeah.
Okay.
I got it now.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you had a group of materials or books or articles or whatever that could be on hand. If we bought them as a church, if they are on hand for people to use as they come up against people with these problems, but which would keep us informed on a lay basis. Obviously, we don't have the qualifications for professional use, but so often we come across people with these problems, and it would be useful to have materials on hand that we as a church could go to easily and use.
Yeah, that is a good point, actually, and it would be helpful to have that. I guess we'd need to think about what there's so much out there. There is so much out there. So I don't know whether the church has, the church body has a kind of a literature that is recommended to use, or whether we can choose ourselves as a local church. But there is a lot out there.
Maybe if there was a list of either books or articles that was available, so that people could go online and say, okay, I can find the answers to this there.
Yeah, it might be worth contacting Cornerstone, the counselling service. They might have literature. I think with all this stuff, it's probably important not to reinvent the wheel, and there will be kind of lists out there and articles out there, so we can, yeah, I can have, Pastor, we can kind of talk about that and think about what we could come up with in terms of a church, or what there is kind of more generally. But yeah, I think we do need to have something that we can pass to people. And of course, there's also different perspectives. You've got the sort of NA and the AA approach, which is incredibly helpful, and I'd highly recommend. But they take a very abstinence-based approach, and they can be very strict with abstinence, and that doesn't work for everyone. For some people, they need to reduce. Some people, they need to know that they have the choice to reduce, and then, if they want to, get to that point of abstinence. So I think we need a range of different, kind of NA, AA type material, and also the kind of more, kind of harm reduction type material. But yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I think the church's position is that we serve as a referral source. So we come across someone who has such challenges. The church has a department from the conference Cornerstone, where these are addressed. There are volunteers who are willing to help them. So what we do, even if Cornerstone is busy, we serve as a source of referral. So we can cover a compilation of services that are available. Like Jeremy said, we don't reinvent the wheel. There are several services available that are giving this support. So as a church, we would serve as a referral source to these services that are available already. But yes, we can have leaflets or flyers with basic information on them, directing people or informing people of the availability of help. Alvaro.
Thank you, Pastor. Dr. Jeremy, a question on how could we develop a safe platform
Do you
where
have
we
another
could...
gadget on?
Yes, just a
Yeah.
second.
If you can mute one, please. Just mute one, and then you can, yeah.
Is that better? Yes, thank you. When we talk about addictions and among other subject or topics, which are, or most of the times, we don't feel comfortable as a church to discuss. And often we don't open ourselves up in order to talk about it. How do you think, or what would it be, according to your experience, to deal with children, for example? I know with Pastor, we were talking about yesterday how to amplify a little bit difficult subject that our children are facing. But from this subject, addiction, meanwhile, we were talking in your presentation, my daughter said, what is addiction? So all of a sudden, I have the feeling that, well, at least this was my experience. I am an old generation, but I had to find out as I went to teenagers age and just basically find out what it was. So do you think that there is a way or any tip in which we can maybe start talking to children in an appropriate way, constructive way? Just I'm interested to hear your own experience.
Yeah, thank you. I can sense a workshop coming on, Pastor, when we're maybe all kind of in person of how we talk to our children and young people and just each other about these kind of things without shutting them down and without making it confrontational and basically I think leading people to those behaviors, because I think if we just shut down a conversation and say this is bad, don't go near it, it's evil, don't even think about it and not talk about it, we spark people's interest. We all know that, don't we, from our own children, how that works, and you say no, they want to go and do it, and that stays with us, I think, throughout life. So I think children, young people are not stupid. They know what's on out there, and I mean, things are times are so different now, aren't they, with social media and the internet. I remember growing up, there's no internet when I was growing up. You can find out anything now, and if they don't find out from us, they will find out from the internet, and we don't know what they're going to get. Things are glamorized, and music will kind of glamorize cannabis and alcohol, and I think it's partly our duty to be honest with people, honest with our children, and about and this might be controversial, but about why people use and why people become addicted. Because if you say it's all bad, don't ever go near it because it will ruin your life. But look at how many people drink. How many people smoke, how many people have addictive behaviors. They're going to think, well, hang on. Actually, that they think they're holding down jobs. They're doing really well. They've got lots of friends. They look really glamorous. So I think it's important to be transparent and honest. And this goes with anything, I think, really about the realities of these things, and present that, but also at the same time, I'm not saying we glamorize it, but at the same time say, actually, it can lead to these problems. And I think just opening up a really honest conversation without kind of dictating and insisting. And I think kind of, that for many kind of issues is probably one of the best ways that we can deal with these things, because whatever we say, they're going to find out themselves from somebody else. And I think if our children and young people can't talk to us because they fear our response and fear that we're just going to clamp down and say, don't even, then they will go to somebody else and talk to somebody else. And, I think if they can come back to us and say, look, I've heard this about it, my friend smokes and they're happy and they enjoy it, and we just talk to them, then I think that's probably the way forward with addiction. And with anything really like that. I think if we're approachable, then we can have an open, honest dialogue with our children about it and young people about it. And what I said at the beginning, if people think that we're judgmental and telling people what to do and how to do it because we know best, they won't talk to us. And then they'll go off and do those things and we won't even know. But I think, I mean that's difficult because it's often a generational thing, and then as you kind of highlighted, many come from a generation in which that was the way to do things, and within church that is often the way, isn't it, that we do things. It's we have a standard and you have to live up to that standard or else you're out the door, and I think we need to do things differently, because the world is changing and there's so much information out there that we need to be on top of it. And we need to be approachable, and even if we disagree, at least we know what our children are doing and what young people are doing. So, but a workshop on how to kind of talk about these issues might need to arrange. I'll be happy to be involved with that.
Okay, we have 2 hands, and I believe if there are no other hands, if you want to ask a question, please put your hand up so we can make the time. But with these 2 hands, if there are no more, we will finish after that. Auntie Yushan and then Auntie Regina.
Thank you, Dr. Jeremy. I really already like your presentation, and I got Pathfinder and Adventurer. They got a requirement for smoking and a drug, alcohol, and I saw your presentation. I already kind of put you down in the program. If it's possible, we're going to ask you to lead our young people with this requirement. I just put it down. I was thinking of ask you, but when Uncle Alvaro is asking, and as I'm just, bring it together here, if it's okay with you, it'd be nice if we young people can have you.
Sure.
You prepare a program in a level of our younger ones. Okay. It'd be nice for all of us.
Okay, we'll talk kind of outside of this and discuss what you need.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Auntie Regina?
Dr. Jeremy, I had a similar question. You said you can do workshops. How soon can those be done with our youth in the church? And what's your availability?
Should we talk outside of this and arrange that?
Okay.
Without looking at my diary and kind of finding out what you want and the times and everything, we'll sort it out afterwards. But I'll be happy to. Yeah, there's no problem at all.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, Jeremy wanted to help or would like to help with the outreach ministry, and so if you can include him in the planning for the outreach team, I believe that will be the best way forward to using his skills in that way. Thank you. And thank you, Auntie Yushan, for the Pathfinders as well. That will be really helpful for the young people. Elder David, I saw your hands up.
No, to be honest, it was covered. Pastor, I'd just like to thank Jeremy for making things understandable, as you always do, Jeremy. I know you you got huge depth of knowledge, but it's really helpful that you talk to me and talk to us in ways that we can actually see as practical. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you, Dr. Jeremey, for tonight and for previous presentation that you've done for some of our small groups. It is very helpful, and I'm sure those of us who didn't know about addiction, at least we have an idea. And we also know you are there. And so anyone struggling, we have a resource person that we can go to. Don't suffer alone. Sometimes we assume because we're all Christians, we have no challenges, but people suffer in silence. They come to church and we see the smiles and everything flamboyantly, but they go home and there is a problem, but they can't come out because sometimes the church environment is so judgmental. So I'm so happy that you mentioned the non-judgmental environment, that we can allow people to open up. Or all of us, myself included, have that attitude that sometimes we shut the door for people who would otherwise come forward to talk to us due to our judgmental approach. And thank you. We hope this is not going to be the end, and that we would have you again on maybe other subjects, not just addiction. Pastor Garth, do you want to bless us for tonight, if you don't mind, before we finish?
Are we still unmuted?
No, we're unmuted, Bob.
Where is it?
We can hear you. We can hear you, Pastor.
Okay. Our loving Father in heaven, we thank you for the privilege we had this evening of listening to someone who has the expertise, the knowledge, and the ability to communicate well. We thank you for his advice and guidance this evening. May we be able to take these things to heart, practice them in our own lives, and so be able to pass on to others what we've learned. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. God bless you all. We will see you on the same platform tomorrow. Due to the weather, we have postponed our face-to-face services to Zoom for tomorrow's service. So please, if you know anyone who is not aware, just pass the message on so that we can all meet on the same platform tomorrow morning for our usual Sabbath service. God bless you all, and good